In this day and age, everyone and their mom seems to be in love with everything that Japan has ever produced. One of those things are samurai. In most pieces of media and fiction, samurai get depicted as great and honorable warriors. Men in shining armor driven by their pride and their code, their bushido, being harsh yet merciful to both their allies and foes. But this depiction isn't 100% true. Depending on the period you're looking at, everything I just described could be true, because this description stems from the Edo period of the 17th century, where Japan was in a time of peace, where samurai were more like a politician than warrior. But looking back to the 15th to 16th century, back when Japan was more or less in a constant state of war, things were different. Samurai fought to win. No one-on-ones for the sake of fairness, no waiting for an opponent to be ready. They used whatever dishonorable means necessary to survive and win, and they would also retreat if they didn't think that they could win a battle. However, from their perspective and in their time, it was honorable to fight for a daimyo. So by their means, if you won, you were honorable. It's just that the times have changed. It's also notable that the modern concept of bushido, you know, that stuff about loyalty, honor and respect, originated sometime in the 19th century when the samurai class was already abolished. Different clans had different codes of honor, but there wasn't a unified code of bushido. And wow, that was a really long intro for a manga. This wasn't meant to be a history lesson, I just got really into it when I started researching for this video. Oh, and don't quote me on any of that, because I got all of my information off of Google, so sorry if I was talking rubbish. But to cut it short, I'm gonna be talking about the manga that shows the more or less, let's call it realistic side of samurai, even though it is definitely exaggerated, or at least I hope so. And that manga is Shigurui, which is basically about the battle between a one-armed and a blind swordsman, and what led to the battle, which is being held for the sadistic younger brother of the Shogun. We get the backstory of the one-armed swordsman Fujiki Genosuke and the blind swordsman Iraku Seigen, where both of their bodies were still whole, and immediately witness an unusual sight, as Fujiki isn't stopping his assault when his opponent already gave up, instead strangling him further to make him learn. And when another swordsman, Iraku, enters the dojo to challenge him, we get a piece of background that apparently it is customary to disfigure any person that tries to challenge their dojo. That's not what Vagabond taught me. We also get to see a demonstration for some lord where a talented swordsman with 6 fingers, which is actually Fujiki's master, beheads like 4 people all at once, because apparently every person in this manga is a sadistic asshole. The same swordsman, Kogan Iwamoto, is just like every other person in this manhwa, a little bit sick in the head and does all sorts of unhinged shit. Dude pisses himself, nearly violates his own daughter, plays dentist with one of his students, orders the destruction of another dojo, and marries his daughter off, and all of that in just a single chapter.
Stop it. Get some help.
After Iraku gets accepted into the Kogan school, which Fujiki is also a part of, some time goes by and both of them try to sneak attack 2 twins which are renowned as the strongest warriors in all of Nikasa after they finish brutalizing 2 male prostitutes. Yeah, that's a sentence you don't hear too often. Well, to cut the summary short, the whole manga is basically the backstory of the 2 swordsmen. It shows us how both of them want to rise up in a corrupt world full of sadists. One fights against the system and the other one follows it, but by the end both of them are monsters. And there are some random acts of violence sprinkled in. Most of the time it's one of the main characters, or actually just any other dude, being tortured or being exposed to some other kind of physical or mental pain. It could be a passerby that gets cut to pieces for looking at someone wrong, a prisoner that gets to be the main source of let's call it entertainment, for some lore for the next 5 minutes, or even some mild cannibalism. One time, a random swordsman got a new sword, and how do you try out if your new sword is sharp? Yeah, you slash a random dude on the street. How couldn't I think of that? The events that happen in every single chapter are cruel and disgusting, and I think that is exactly what it wants to be and show. I do not think that it is a historically accurate representation of samurai, or at least the majority of them, but it is interesting to experience another view on the history of the samurai. So let's get to the main selling point of the manga, which is definitely the amazing art. And it is as beautiful as it is disgusting. Not only during the fight scenes, but also out of combat, the art really is spectacular. I'm not kidding when I say that Shigurui has some of the most amazing panels that I've ever seen. And I've read Vagabond. And while the character design isn't something special, because there are multiple manga in this time period in a similar realistic style, you can still actually tell the difference between main and supporting characters, even though they do look similar. Every single revolting scene is drawn in such amazing detail that you get sick while reading it, but you just can't look away. The cuts, the punches and the sword strikes are both believable and over the top at the same time. Every time a character experiences pain, it in some way influences them, like blood in the eyes for example, which makes the combat much more realistic. And then someone suddenly gets a small nick on their belly and a whole 2 bodies worth of intestines shoot out of the opening. And there are some techniques used where even Baki would get jealous of. Every once in a while, a character, most of the time in combat, is drawn without his clothes on, which is when you see amazing detail regarding the human body and anatomy. And in those scenes, injuries like bruises or broken bones are presented very well, and it shows just how brutal the fights we are currently watching really are. Sometimes you forget it by watching fights from other shows, but in this manga every single hit counts. It also works to show a scar one character got from another, to show the bond and the destiny they share. But sometimes seeing a naked ass man in the middle of a duel to the death is just a little bit weird. Another thing which I don't like too much is that occasionally we see potential futures, so to speak, or more like bad omen, when a character worries about another one, and that is something that I think is just a little bit unnecessary. Most of the time it is like a panel or 2 of one of those characters where they get cut to pieces or their skull gets cracked. It's just an excuse to show more violence and shock the reader. And there's a frog man. And for all of you fellow pussies out there, on page 14 of chapter 10 there's a well drawn big ass spider. Thank me later. I think that it's a good manga that perfectly does what it wants to do, and that is to show the true colors of a horrible and corrupt world that swallows up everyone that enters it without brightening up a single part of it. The ending and the story is amazing. It shows us that only by death can you truly escape this hell. There are no morally good characters. Every single one of them does what's best for them, and will do everything in their power to achieve exactly that. And like 90% of them are sick in the head. No complaints there. The violence shown is unfiltered and disgusting, and shows that even if you are a normal person that hasn't done any significant bad deed in your life, you could still get struck down by a Ronin just because he wants to. Shigurui is brutal, grotesque and at times completely unhinged, and has some of the best fighting scenes that I've ever read. The manga is completed with 84 chapters, and it even has an anime adaptation which I haven't seen, but from everything I read it isn't too bad. But I do think that it ends about halfway through the story. So I do think that the manga is good, but at times it's just a little bit over the top for me. And if you aren't too keen on blood and guts, maybe sit this one out. But for the rest of you, read to your heart's content. Yeah, that's all. Stay safe. Bye.